Good morning, Culinary Arts students. Welcome back to Culinary Arts 7 Baking. This is our second week of doing some demos for you guys for the upcoming week. I hope you guys enjoyed all your cookies last week and that your family enjoyed it and the experience is going well. Please don't hesitate to continue sending me questions via Canvas. Remember, your assignments have to be turned in Canvas only and on time or else they won't be counted. This week we're going to be doing a couple of my favorites. We're going to be doing some scones. We're going to be doing some pumpkin quick bread. So you want to come on over here, we'll take a look at the recipes real quick and we'll talk about what we're going to be working on today. Okay, so our first recipe is going to be our scone recipe. And Brittany's already scaled out the recipe for you. You guys are going to be doing about a half-time recipe. I'm going to do a full-time recipe. Okay, but as we look at the ingredients, we've got currants or raisins, candied orange peel, bread flour, granulated sugar, baking powder, salt, heavy cream, and a little bit of honey. Scones I sent you guys some videos on the scones that you'll be able to watch. It's a little bit out of the history, a little bit of some people making some various kind of scone recipes. I really love scones. They're great, for breakfast usually, but they're awesome for lunch or snacks and things like that as well. So here's our ingredients right here. So you can really use any inclusions. So these right here are called inclusions because they add flavor and texture to a baked good, but they don't really add structure at all. So the inclusions call for, in this recipe, raisins and orange peel, but I'm pretty sure that you guys got chocolate and almonds. But you really could put any kind of inclusion that you like in there. These are candied orange rind that I made over winter break. I really love orange and chocolate. I got some chocolate from Winco, just chopped it up roughly like this. So those are my inclusions. Then I've got my dry ingredients scaled out here already. I've got my flour, my sugar, my salt, and my baking powder ready to go. Then in here I've got heavy cream and honey. You can see the honey's down the bottom. You notice a lot of times I will combine ingredients. So these are all going in at the same time. These are all my dry ingredients. So there's no reason I can't just put them all in at the same time. These are my liquids. I've got my honey and my cream in there. I'm going to give that a little stir before we get going with that, but then that's going to go in right away. Also, another difference that I'm doing is that the recipe calls for you to mix this by hand, which is totally fine. I usually like to use a mixer to get it done a little bit quicker, especially when you're doing big batches of scones. If you're making 60, 80 pounds, you're not going to be mixing it by hand. You're going to use a mixer. So today we're going to use this mixer. And we'll show you how to shape out the scones, how to prep them for in the oven. I usually like to bake at about 400 degrees because you need to get a little bit of nice color on the scones. And we'll start now mixing them all up. Okay, so I'm gonna take my honey and my cream here. Just take the lid off. Now I've got my dry ingredients. I'm gonna add those all in right into my mixing bowl. Like I said, you can do this with a mixer, or you can just do it by hand. If you don't have a mixer, this is a great recipe for you. So I got my dry ingredients in here. I'm just gonna turn on low speed for just a second, get it all nice and incorporated. Then I'm gonna start adding my liquids to it, really. It's really pretty fast and easy. So I should incorporate it nicely. I'm gonna pour a little bit of my cream in. I'm going to stir my honey into my cream like this. Make sure it all gets blended in. I want to make sure we get all of our ingredients in there. Got a little bit of Motown playing in the background. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, so we always love Motown, Jackson 5, Temptations, all that kind of music when I was a kid. I like to listen to music when I'm in the kitchen. Hopefully when you guys get into the kitchen and Culinary Arts 8, I always have the radio playing. You guys can have your choice of what you want to listen to. Okay, so I've got this mixed up a little bit. I'm going to pour that all in. I'm going to pour it all in at once. Now, I also left out a portion of my cream that I'm going to use to top my scones with here, too. So I'm going to just get that incorporated a little bit. I'm not going to mix it very long. And now I'm going to put my inclusions in. So here goes my chocolate. Some are kind of little big chunks, some are little smaller chunks. Try to be pretty uniform in that. I want to get this in before I completely mix my scone batter because I don't want to over mix my dough. Okay, that's gonna look pretty good to me. You see the dough is pretty rough looking. Another thing the book says not to do is don't knead your batter. I don't mind kneading it a little bit to give it a little bit more structure. I definitely like to use my fingers to clean off my paddle nicely like this. When you're baking, obviously I just wash my hands, but you want to make sure that you can clean things and do things efficiently and quickly. Okay? Give my hands a quick rinse here. I'll come back in. Okay. I'm going to take this over to my bench now. So we're going to come back over here and work right in the middle. I'm going to dump my dough out on my bench. Want to make sure I've got a nice clean work area, if at all possible. I'm going to clean my bowl out. One thing I see a lot of students sometimes doing is not really scraping out their mixing bowls very well, so we want to make sure we do a good job scraping those out. If you don't, you're just throwing out ingredients, which is more than likely is going to upset your boss one day, so we don't want to throw out ingredients, but basically you're just throwing out money. I'm going to put a little flour on my bench. One thing I tried to stress to all of you is that we want to be flexible in how we do things. Sometimes the book says to do one thing. Sometimes I'll tell you how to do something another way. You're going to go to work one day and your boss is going to be like, I want you to do it this way. And you're going to be like, okay, whatever the boss says. So I did knead it just a little bit. You can see it with my consistency, my dough is quite soft. Okay. I like to try and get mine into a nice little round disc like this. Then I'm going to cut it into triangles, which is pretty, the way I've done it for quite a few years. You know, sometimes you use like a cutters, like in the video. I definitely, I posted some examples where they're using cutters to cut the dough. The reason I don't like to use cutters is that if you've ever made biscuits and you've cut something with cutters, you know they've also always got a little bit of leftover dough. And then you've got to re-knead that dough into a shape that you can work with. And then you're going to maybe develop a little bit too much gluten development in it, and it might get a little bit tougher than it should be. Okay, so I'm putting a little bit of cream on top. This is my leftover cream from the recipe. Remember, if you add all the cream in the recipe, it's going to be too soft. Okay. And the recipe doesn't really have that much sugar, so I like to put a little sprinkle of sugar on there too. But I'm going to cut my dough into pieces. If you want to put this in the refrigerator for a little bit to let it get a little bit firmer, it's not a bad idea. Because right now the dough is quite pliable. And usually if I'm working, like if you take the retail baking class, we'll make a lot of scones. We'll make 60 pounds of scones. And then we will just shape it like this. We won't even cut it. We'll just shape it and then put it in the freezer, and then whenever we need it, we'll pull it out and let it thaw and put it in the oven. Okay, so I like to lay out my scones like this. Actually, I'm gonna put some sugar on first. I like to do this first because that way it's easy for me to get it onto the scones. If I do it over here, sugar's gonna go all over the sheet pan. I do like a fair amount of sugar on top here because, like I said, the recipe doesn't have that much sugar in it. So this helps contribute to nice browning. Makes it look beautiful in that respect. You get the sweetness from the sugar. So I'm going to get 8 nice scones out of this. I want to try and keep them separate so that they don't grow together. So I want to give them a little bit of space. That's plenty of space right there. The scone will settle a little bit, but not too much. Okay, so we're going to bake these at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you got a convection oven with a fan, go ahead and turn the convection oven on. And we're going to bake them 400 degrees, probably about 30 minutes. I'm probably going to check it about 25 minutes. So we'll pop it in the oven. Then we'll come back in about 30 minutes, okay? We're gonna move on to, I'm gonna clean up a little bit and we're gonna move on to the pumpkin bread. We'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, now we're gonna go back on to our next recipe, the pumpkin quick bread. I don't know about you guys, but some people don't like pumpkin, but I love this recipe. And this recipe actually has raisins in it, which I really love, but we didn't scale those for you guys because a lot of people don't like raisins. I do have some raisins here that we're gonna maybe put into some of my pumpkin quick bread. But in the past, most of the students don't really like raisins, so we don't put that in. Okay. So for you guys, we didn't scale it. Everything else is scaled for you. Again, a halftime recipe. Okay, so let's take a look at the recipe. So the first ingredients are the raisins and the water. We leave those two ingredients out. Okay, the reason they have the water there is because they add the water to the raisins and helps the raisins plump up. You know, sometimes your raisins can be a little bit dry, so that's why the water is in there. But I used to make it with the water. I found that the loaf was kind of flat on top, so it wasn't that great. I like more of a domed loaf on my bread, so I leave the water and the raisins out. The butter and flour mixture, that's for spraying your pans. So we've got, for me, we're going to use just some pan spray in my loaf pans. You guys can use muffin pans, you can use cake pans, whatever you want. Okay, so going back to the recipe, we've got pumpkin puree, granulated sugar, eggs, salt, vegetable oil, and I usually just use like a corn oil. Then we got bread flour, cake flour, ground cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, baking powder, and soda. So this is kind of a spicy recipe. It's great for the fall. We usually make this for the retail baking class. We sell like tons of this in the bakery when we operate the bakery. But it's a pretty easy recipe. It takes about 15 minutes to make because we're going to be developing some texture by paddling some of the ingredients for a while to incorporate aerosol. Let's take a look at the rest of the instructions here. Okay, so step one is combine the raisins and water. Again, we're not doing that for this group. Unless you want to add raisins to your recipe, but if you do, I just add dry raisins just like that, no water. Then they're talking about prepping the pans, so we're just going to use a pan spray. Step number 3 is using our paddle attachment, mix a pumpkin puree, sugar, eggs, and salt for approximately 8 minutes at medium speed. Okay, so sorry about that. Again, we're on step number 3, so using the paddle attachment. So this is my paddle for my little 4-quart mixer. You can use your beaters if you've had a beater. You really do need a mixer for this recipe though. Okay, so using the paddle attachment, mix a pumpkin puree, sugar, eggs, and salt for approximately 8 minutes at medium speed. Okay, so we're going to start with that. So we've got our pumpkin puree right here, got our sugar, and our salt. Our salt is right there, that little pile, but I blended that all together. So I'll put that in. Going to add my pumpkin puree. I just went to the grocery store and got some Libby's pumpkin puree. Okay. This over here. So let's see, just double checking. I always want to make sure I'm double checking. So pumpkin puree, sugar, eggs, and salt. So that's everything there. So I got 4 nice eggs here cracking. It's gonna look kind of soupy, you know, but I'll get a close shot. So it's gonna look a little bit soupy in here, but it's not a big deal. Right now, so we're gonna mix it for 8 minutes. And we're gonna pause the video for 8 minutes and we'll come back. But we're gonna mix it for 8 minutes on a medium speed because we're developing texture right now. So we're incorporating aerosols. We're helping to leaven the final product. I don't turn it on high speed right away. I want to get it mixing for a minute or so. I'm gonna set my timer. I'm gonna give it a quick scrape just to make sure I got everything off the bottom of the mixer. because I want to make sure I'm getting all the ingredients incorporated in. So I give it one quick scrape. Then we're going to turn it off. We're going to turn it on. And we'll be back in 8 minutes. Okay, so we've been mixing our batter here for 8 minutes. Come on and take a look at it for a second. It's kind of got aerated a little bit. We've worked some air into that. That's going to help the final product rise. Okay, next thing is we've got our oil here, and that's going to go in. We're going to kind of put that in a slow, steady stream. We don't want to just dump it all in. We want to put it in slow because we're kind of creating a little bit of an emulsification here. So I want the oil to be going in slowly so that it has the opportunity to get mixed in and create a nice emulsification. And when I talk about emulsifications, you know what when you go to the grocery store and you buy a container of Italian dressing, you got the oils and the vinegars are separated. And when you shake it up, that creates a emulsification where everything's incorporated. So that's why we want to add this nice and slow. If you've ever made mayonnaise at home, you know what I'm talking about. So we want to get this in slowly so it all gets incorporated beautifully. And then we'll be going on to our dry ingredients. So we've got our dry ingredients here. We've got our flours here. Got our spices right there. Then we've got our leaveners, our chemical leaveners. I think there's baking powder and baking soda in the recipe. Okay. So these are this is what's going to cause, and the 8 minutes of mixing, and these chemical leaveners, what's going to cause our baked good to rise. We're going to bake it around 350 degrees. And we're going to be really careful about opening up our oven because the pumpkin bread is kind of delicate. It's kind of like a souffle in some ways. And that we can't risk opening it up too early. So I don't open my ovens up until I see that the bread on top looks like this, a nice dome, you know. It doesn't look like this, crown then flat, then it looks like this, nice and domed on top. If we open it too early, it has a tendency to fall down, and then it's like, there's really not much you can do about it. Okay, so we've got our oil mixing beautifully. Looks nice and homogenized, nice uniform blending. Okay, and then we got our dry ingredients we're gonna go in next. And they're just gonna go right in. We don't wanna add it in slowly because we don't wanna sit there and mix. We wanna get everything incorporated because this is a quick bread, you know? And it's a quick bread because we're using chemical leaveners. But here's our spices are going in. Gives lots of nice flavor. Chemical leaveners. Keep an eye on your baking sodas and baking powders because if they're lumpy, you should definitely sift it first because if you got chunks going in, they probably won't break down. Okay, so we're mixing our dry ingredients in now. We're not going to mix it for too long because we want this to be a tender baked good. You know, it's kind of like a muffin in reality. So we want it to be nice and tender. I'll turn my speed up a little bit. Make sure everything's getting broken down. I'm going to give it a good scrape. We always want to scrape all the way down to the bottom because a lot of times there's some flour particles or something down there that needs to get incorporated. Scraping my spatula off nice. Okay. I'm going to mix it again. So when we scrape, we always remix. I'm going to turn the speed up a little bit. You can see how thick it is now, you know. It's a nice batter type consistency. And we're done. Now, if you wanted to add your raisins in, now would be the time to dump your raisins in. But my wife and kids are like, we don't really like raisins that much. I like raisins in mine, but they don't. Okay, so now I'm going to take this, I'm going to get this scraped off. Again, I'm just going to use my fingers. It's the quickest, most efficient way to clean my paddle off, and I get everything off. Remember what I said, we don't want to waste anything in the culinary industry. Every time you throw food away, you're throwing money away. Okay, now I'm going to take my batter over here. I've got my prepared pans ready to go. Let me get this in a little bit. So these are the pans that I'm going to be using. I've already sprayed them, they're ready to go. And I'm gonna probably fill these up about halfway, maybe 2/3 full max. Right? I am going to put them on my little scale. I went and bought this scale at the hardware store. I think it's about 30 bucks. It's a nice tool to have for sure. I'm gonna put this on here. I'm gonna zero it out. And that way I can keep track of how much batter is actually going in here. I want to be really consistent, especially when you're running a retail bakery and things like that. I'll never forget when I was working at a hotel back in Michigan. We had a retail bakery attached to it that I was responsible for. And every day this lady would come in and look at the cookies. Like, those cookies look different from yesterday's. Or, did you just bake those brownies? Kind of drives you nuts sometimes, but you got to be really consistent. Okay, with everything you do, because you're going to have customers that are going to come in like, well, gee, I got cookie last week. It was bigger than this cookies this week. And I'm paying the same price. And sometimes they get kind of, oops, cut my finger yesterday. Okay, so I put 500 grams in that first loaf. I'm gonna try and get 500 grams in this loaf. Okay, so I got 500 grams. And the rest, I'm gonna put raisins in too. So I love raisins in mine. I got about 100 grams of raisins in there. I know it sounds kind of funny, man. And my assistant here is making faces right now when I'm adding the raisins in there. But man, I really love the raisins in my pumpkin bread. This thing gives just a nice little different component, you know. Raisins are kind of a fall kind of item, so I like it. Okay, so I'm gonna scoop in here. And this loaf will be for me and whoever likes raisins. Okay, I'm gonna scrape my bowl out beautifully. Like I said, I use my hands quite a bit. As long as you're washing your hands, as long as it's an item that's gonna be baked, you know. If I'm handling a mousse that is ready to eat, you know, there's things that are called ready to eat foods or ready to serve foods, like a cookie that was baked. I wouldn't pick that up with my raw hand and put that in the counter to sell to somebody. So again, we want to make sure we scrape our bowl pretty well. Give my hands a quick wash with rinse. Now these are ready to go in the oven. Okay, so these ones are nice and evenly quantities in there. One thing I like to put on this recipe as well, it's not in the book, is a streusel recipe. I think it's on page 40. I should have already looked that up already. Take a look real fast. Come on over here real quick there. Streusel topping. So if you wanted to make some streusel topping to put on top, this recipe calls for the creaming method, but you could also do the biscuit method. I love making some of this up and then sprinkling a heavy layer on top. Gives it a nice visual appeal. You know, I talk to students all the time about how things need to look. Should they look good? What's more important, does it taste good or look good? I'm kind of the opinion, if it doesn't look good, then people aren't going to buy it. So it needs to look good first, needs to taste good, needs to look great, needs to taste great, and we need to have a good value price on it too for customers to keep coming back. Okay, so if you want to make some streusel for some bonus points, nice layer of streusel on top, then into the oven. Again, we're going to be baking at 350 degrees. I'm going to pop these bad boys in the oven. I like to make sure I leave plenty of space around my items that are in the oven. And these are probably going to take about 45 minutes, I think. Okay. So we're going to check on them in about 45 minutes. Our scones will be ready pretty soon too. We'll come back and do a little bit of a recap. Tasting, break them up, cut them up a little bit, see what they look like on the inside. As far as these goes, when I bake some type of a quick bread in a loaf pan, I like to let them cool down until I can hold them with my hands. Once I can hold them with my hands, then I want to unmold them right away. Okay? You don't want to let them get cold in the pans because then they'll start sticking. You want to unmold them when the pans are too hot because then they'll probably fall apart when they come out as well. Okay, so we got those in the oven 40, 45 minutes. That's my oven, you know, that's my size pans. Yours is going to be a little different. So if you've got like a little glass where you can look through and see the baked goods, you want to be really careful about them. You want to make sure you open the oven up when the bread has come up and is cresting like this. Okay. Pumpkin bread's pretty sensitive. Scones, not so much. You want a nice dark golden color on the scones before you pull those out of the oven. Okay? All right, we'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so here's our scones. They're nice and golden brown. Come up and take a close look. They're nice and golden brown coming out of the oven. That's the way I like them. See how they come up nice and close. So they spread a little bit, but not much. They should pretty much hold their shape. They sagged a little bit. And you can see like the sugar formation on here, the crust, kind of like a nice little sugar crust. See the chocolate popping through, the orange pieces popping through. We're gonna cut one open. I've got some hungry customers here at home. Everybody wants to have a scone. So they're like I said, they're nice and dry. They should be nice and golden brown on the bottom. And we should break them in half like this. They're nice and well done on the inside. You can see there's not gooey at all. They're gonna be nice and crispy. Smells fantastic. Okay, so that's our first recipe for the week. I hope you guys enjoy your scones as well. Pumpkin bread's still in the oven. We're gonna come back for that in a few minutes. Okay, so the pumpkin bread has come out of the oven. Come on, we'll take a good look at it. We got two different sizes here. It's probably a good example of something what not to do. See, like this pumpkin bread looks like it's fallen in the middle a little bit, which is not good. And then these ones here look nice. They've risen nicely. They've set. It's kind of a good example that this is like baking a big cookie and a small cookie in the same sheet pan. Small cookie's going to be done. Big cookie's going to be a little bit on the raw side. So be careful about that. But we'll take this one out here and see if we can get it unmolded. They've been out for about 30 or 40 minutes. I can pick them up with my hands easily. I'm going to kind of tap it a little bit here. See if I can get it to loosen up. Then I'm going to flip it over. Hopefully it'll come out. Yeah, it looks like it did. Okay, so it looks good. Like that. I'm going to get a knife out and we'll cut that in half. And this is what I want to see from you guys. I want you cutting your baked goods open for me so I can see what it looks like on the inside. Okay. It should be a relatively uniform cell structure inside. Shouldn't be any really big holes. I think that maybe is like a little tear from the raisin because this is a little bit still pretty warm. But the pumpkin bread, you definitely want it to be nice, small cell structure, not really big holes or anything like that. Kind of like what you would get from a pound cake. Okay, so we can take a look on this side as well. See, it's all baked. It does look a little bit gooier down here. I would bet maybe if I cut another slice in there, it might show a little bit more moisture. Again, I'm using my serrated knife. It is a little bit premature to be cutting these. You see I'm getting a little bit of a gap here. To me, it looks like it could have probably stayed in the oven for maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. But these ones here look nice. Then we got our scones over here. I've already eaten 3 of the scones. Everybody loves the scones. Pumpkin bread will go fast as well. Hope that your family and friends enjoy everything. Make sure you're cutting things open. Make sure you're breaking things in half like this so I can see what it looks like on the inside. Any questions, give me a call. I'll be posting this, and that's it for this week. Hope you guys enjoy your baked goods.